Premier Danielle Smith puts in this new law, this new bill banning transgender surgeries for those under 18. Fine and good, right? But there are some things in there that I think are worrying, that I think are troublesome and probably don't go far enough. And a lot of it I don't think actually makes consistent logic or consistent sense. And I'll tell you which parts. Banning surgeries and hormones for children under 18, all well and good, right? But there are some caveats in there. 16 and 17-year-olds can still get access to hormones, and the words she uses are for gender reassignment or affirmation purposes. Right away when you're using the word affirmation, gender affirmation, you're sort of agreeing with the logic there, right? That you're affirming the correct gender that the child believes to be. And the other stuff they put in there, children can still learn about this in schools if their parents are okay with it, which of course many of them will be. They don't want to be bigoted. And of course that any curriculum regarding gender will have to be put through the province, which I thought would be the law anyways, right? That the teachers can't just go rogue and teach whatever they want, but I guess I was wrong. And one of the more strange things, and we'll delve into this a bit more, is that the fact that the province is going to find surgeons who specialize in transgender surgeries and bring them to Alberta so that people in the province don't have to go to Quebec, as she suggested. Lots of problems with that, of course. The first part of this is, most of it doesn't make logical sense. Like I said, if you are against children transitioning genders, you don't think they should be doing it, you think it's bad for them, they need to become adults before they can make these decisions, why would you carve out a special, section to say, okay, 16 and 17-year-olds are old enough to make these decisions, get hormones and whatnot? I mean, they can't vote, they can't drink, they're just starting to drive a car, they can't gamble, they can't smoke, they can't join the military, they can join cadets, but what's this idea of mature teens? This is actually a left-wing point. Left-wing people and Democrats in the United States have been arguing for a few years now that there's such a thing as mature minors in regards to sex changes, in regards to voting, and in regard to age of consent. You can pretty much imagine where that's going. So already Danielle Smith, in her video that she posted, she's used a lot of leftist terminology, and through using that, she has agreed with their viewpoint by accepting that. Now, if you were to talk to a person who's making the arguments Danielle Smith was making in person, you would not be okay with it. It would not make sense to you. You wouldn't have a person who's sitting in front of you who says, gender transitions and surgeries for minors are bad, but it's okay for 16 or 17-year-olds, and it's okay for children to learn about. If you believe it to be bad, why is it only bad up to a certain age, and why would you permit it being taught? That's what I don't understand. Children shouldn't be doing that, but you want to tell them about it anyways? The reality here is men cannot be women and women cannot be men. Very controversial, simple fact, I know. But yet you want it to be taught to children. So, logically speaking, why is that the one that gets chosen? Why can't you teach them about BDSM? Why can't you teach them about drag queens? A left-wing person or a progressive could make the argument that, well, if we're teaching about transgenderism, which is a progressive ideology in itself, why aren't we teaching them about our views on climate change? Why aren't we teaching them about left-wing views on drag queens? Why aren't we teaching them about left-wing views on globalism, et cetera, et cetera? If you're going to okay progressives to teach an ideological viewpoint to your children and say, well, it just has to go through parents and it just has to go through, the province, then there is an argument to be made that they should be allowed to teach all these other things, which are fringe, and I'm sorry to tell you, perversions that exist on, the spectrum of sexual desires within some people. There's 1% of transgenderism, way less than 1%. What other sexual perversions would you like to teach your children? Would you like a stripping class? Would you like a class about life of being a prostitute or anything like that? May sound ridiculous, but when you start getting into these extremely fringe topics, what is off bounds if you're saying, let's teach these kids about how men can be women and women can be men? Her referring to it as gender affirming care, like I said, she's using the language. And when you use this language, this fake language that progressives and leftists use, you're basically accepting their worldview to be true. Gender affirming care means that you are affirming their gender. You are agreeing that they are actually the gender which they propose and pertain to be. Whatever word you want to use, you're agreeing with them. You wouldn't use this in any other medical instance or any mental health instance. You wouldn't say, I'm affirming your anorexia. You wouldn't say, I'm affirming your body image. You wouldn't tell a child that, yes, this is, you think you're fat, so I'm going to agree with you and affirm it. You don't affirm somebody's addiction to alcohol. You don't say, it's fine that you're addicted to this drug, or it's fine that you can't stop drinking 12 beers a day. That's not good. Okay, you can't just say that you're affirming something and therefore it's good. You're just agreeing with them. So by her using that language, it's almost like the climate crisis, you know? You're agreeing by using the language, and that's troublesome. And that's what brings me to the conclusion that there must be two ideas here at play. Either Danielle Smith agrees with the gender ideology, you know, for the most part, except for the surgical part, apparently, for children, or she doesn't agree and she's governing out of fear. She's fearful of left-wingers, liberals, people on X instead of Twitter, of course, coming after her for saying these things. And I would propose that I think it's the latter. I think that she's afraid to go all the way with it because her beliefs don't actually make sense. As I've laid out, the way she describes these workarounds and these caveats in the law, it doesn't actually make sense. It's not consistent logically speaking. You don't say that transgenderism is bad and the surgeries are bad for children and because they're life altering and they're changing. But once you hit 16, then you can be on these hormones, and you can also continue to do the stuff you've been doing before the law. That's what doesn't make any sense about it as well. How you say it's bad, but it's okay to keep... if you started, you might as well keep continuing, right? Like, as if there's a point of no return where it's like, well, you've already damaged your body a bit. Why not go the full 100% and completely do irreversible damage to your body to the point where you're unrecognizable in 3 or 4 years? Continue that, 12-year-olds. Like, think about that, what that means. If a 12-year-old is already undergoing hormonal, suppressants or testosterone replacements or anything like that, the premier says that it's okay for that child to continue because for some reason they've started already, right? That doesn't really make any sense. That's just an arbitrary thing. And it's just something you would do if you were afraid of people saying, hey, my kid's already doing this. Now you're going to mess them up more. Like, now you're going to make them go back. Like, you have to make a stand somewhere. It's either okay or it's not okay. So I think that because of the fact that most of this doesn't make any sense, logically speaking, and that if you were to argue this point, in a debate or even with a group of friends, you'd say, well, which side are you really on about this? Do you think it's bad or do you think it's kind of bad? Like, do you think giving children surgeries is so much worse than giving them hormones? Like, yes, it probably is worse. But where exactly do you stand in terms of a child having the cognitive function to determine whether or not they should be a different gender? So I think she's governing out of fear. I think she could have gone all the way with this if she wanted to. And I think that once conservatives realize that the people who vote against them don't like them, in many cases they want them in jail or they want them expelled from their society, then they will start to govern with more strength. You see this with Doug Ford. He's done this many times where he sort of, tries to appeal to liberals a lot. He's done it less lately, but he tries to appeal to liberals a lot. And this doesn't work because especially in Alberta, where the NDP is the opposition party, they don't like you. They're not going to like you just because you give them a little bit of leeway. You can already see in Danielle Smith's replies about how people think she's a monster for doing what she did, for going, halfway there. Now that brings up another question. Should we be happy with what Danielle Smith has done? Should we take a small victory here and say, okay, that's something as opposed to nothing, especially in a place like Canada? Or should we say, hey, why the hell didn't you go further? You have the opportunity here to be in power and to make, permanent change and go all the way. But you didn't take it. Why didn't you do that? So yes, it is a step in the right direction. And I was talking to my friend John Doyle about this recently. And I was like, why do you think this is still upsetting to some conservatives? Why do you think this is still it still bothers people that you've taken a step in the right direction, but a lot of it you've carved out these exemptions. 16 and 17-year-olds, you can still do it if you're already on it. Why do you think this is still bothering people, including me? And what he said is because you know something to be wrong here that's happening, and you think that it's easily solvable, and you recognize a weakness in the person enacting it, and you're wondering why that's allowed to permeate. And that's what I think myself and a lot of Canadians wonder. Why are these ideologies allowed to permeate? Why are these politicians who are allegedly conservatives allowed to continue to go down this line that isn't successful? Look where we are as a culture in the country. Yes, Trudeau's probably going to lose. Yes, he's got pretty much record low polling as far as my lifetime. Is the idea here just to wait till he gets out and then push things all the way to the right? I don't think that's actually going to happen. I don't think they're going to get in and all of a sudden, say this is what we really think. That would be dishonest, for example. But should we be happy that an alleged conservative is still governing as if liberals don't want her out of office, as if there aren't still people in jail for, trucker convoy protests? And I sit here and I think, well, yes, you probably should be a little bit happy, because in a country like Canada, this sort of stuff never happens. Restrictions on guns out the ass, no abortion laws at all, whether you agree with it or not. It's crazy that there's no limit, and no sort of prevention for child transition surgeries. And now there's finally one. So you should be happy about that. But with a person in power, you do need to expect them to live up to the ideological standpoint for which they claim. People on the left have a problem with Joe Biden not being left enough, right? Not crushing fossil fuels. He's trying a little bit. Not going insane with the climate agenda. He kind of is. But there's all these sorts of things that leftists go ham about against Joe Biden for not being left-wing enough. Same thing with Trudeau. So it's okay when a person is coming into power and they make all these promises about how they're going to uphold these values which you voted them in for, and then not doing them. It's okay to uphold them and hold them accountable to the things they said they were going to do. And Danielle Smith, I don't think is the conservative people actually thought she was going to be. I think people make a lot of excuses for her, and I think that in terms of the political spectrum, she's kind of just center right. She's not fully right wing. That's why I think she was too afraid to go all the way with this. She's afraid of what people might think. A real conservative would not be. They would say, I'm going to do this because this is right. Not because, Rachel Notley's acolytes or whomever it might be at the time, or Kathleen Wynne's friends, or Justin Trudeau's trickle-down liberal psychos. Let's not govern by the way they think and how they're going to react, because their reaction's always going to be negative no matter what you do. No matter what you do, and I'll leave you with this, no matter what a conservative does, a progressive is going to say that it's evil, because it's not like they kind of agree with you and they can find a middle ground. It's that you are bad and you are harmful to them. They say it all the time. You're harming their existence. You're making their lives dangerous. You're going to kill people. This is their stance on nearly everything. And you think that if you try to extend the olive branch, even though I'm not Greek, people think I am sometimes. If you extend the olive branch to them, they're going to say, hey, you know what? That guy was wrong. And I accept him now. That is never what happens. Leftism and progressivists believe that any problem you have with their governorship is not an actual problem with their ideology, but it is only because that leftism has been improperly applied to your life. And if you just understand why it's better for you, or if it's just tweaked a little bit, then your life will be better. They don't think that your governing and the way you run things is going to make things better. They think any problem in your life is because leftism has been improperly applied. And when it is applied properly, you're just going to see the communist utopia that, Venezuela became, or China currently is, or something like that, or someplace that doesn't exist that they want to be. So Danielle Smith and the other conservatives, we should be thankful to them if they win, of course, on the federal level. We should be thankful to them when they do move the needle a little bit. There is an argument to be made for electability, and there is an argument to be made by not changing things completely as soon as you get some power. But the problem with that is is if you don't do it when you can, it's going to go much worse the other way. They don't care about you. They're not going to just be like, hey, let's think of the conservatives when we pass this gun ban list. Let's think of the conservatives when we bring in 1.5 million people. They're not going to think that, and they're never going to reach out the same branch to you that you want to them. It's just prove me wrong. Tell me where I've gone wrong with that.